From the Dallas On Air studios in beautiful Dallas, Texas, this is Fulfillment right here on DallasOnAir.com. And now here's your hosts, the Vegabomber, PJ Dunn, and the film samurai, Carlos Salinas.
All right. Welcome, everybody, to the show. So we are back once again. As you know, I'm here with my trusty sidekick, sitting here to my right, the film samurai.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Sunny morning, beautiful outside. It's humid a little bit, though.
Yeah, it is. And also, that man behind the camera, K-Zach.
Zach.
Howdy, campers.
Well, welcome to Fulfillment. This is, believe it or not, this is season 2, episode 14. And so what we've been doing is we've been looking at the decades. We looked at the 60s and 70s, the last show, and today we're going to look at the 80s and 90s. And this show happens to be the show that's going to be called my birthday episode because my birthday happened this past week, and then a couple shows back, it was Carlos's birthday that happened before his show.
Feliz cumpleaños, mi amigo.
There it is. Feliz cumpleaños.
Cumpleaños.
There it is. See, this is how I learn and get my learn on here. Who needs the what's that online subscribe deal where you can go in and learn some phrases that you never use? Yeah. I just talk to Carlos. That's what I do. So what we're going to talk about today then is that. And before we jump into the topic of the day, what we usually do is go around and talk about what we've seen lately. So we'll start off with the film samurai. Carlos, what have you watched lately?
All right. Watched a couple of fairly recent movies, and another movie came out in 2013. I caught it on Netflix. Very nice surprise. I'm going to read you. It's called Dark Skies, directed by Scott Stewart. Like I said, it came out in 2013. This is the little what the movie's about. As the Barrett family's peaceful suburban life is rocked by an escalating series of disturbing events, they come to learn that a terrifying and deadly force is after them, one which may have come from the stars. So this is kind of like a alien abduction, I'd say. It's a thriller. It's scary as hell. I was surprised at how scary it was. It literally made my arms, like gave you that little chill, like, oh my God, somebody's in the room with me. Or you ever had night terrors when you wake up and you can't move, you're frozen, and you can't even scream. It gave me that kind of feeling, certain scenes. Of course, the ending got a little bit over the top, but up till then, the movie is really terrifying. I would compare it to Poltergeist crossed with Fire in the Sky. That movie where that guy was abducted.
It's called Dark Skies.
It's called Dark Skies. It's on Netflix right now. Carrie Russell stars in it. She plays the mom. Actor Josh Hamilton, not the baseball player, plays her husband. They have 2 kids, 2 boys. There's a neat reveal at the end. J.K. Simmons is also in it. He plays kind of like the alien expert that they finally go to see after all this stuff is happening.
What? J. Jonah Jameson?
J. Jonah Jameson. Plays a real creepy sort of character, But yeah, I was really surprised at how frightening this movie was. I guess it's something about alien abductions and kind of freak me out, Ghost movies, I'm fine with them. They don't really scare me,
Yeah.
Monsters, werewolves, all that stuff. But aliens, like, just
aliens,
something like they come in the night and their shapes and.
Did this get a series?
No.
Okay.
I know which one you're talking about, but that was probably something like that. But this is just called Dark Skies. The film.
Standalone, huh?
Yeah, standalone film. And
wow.
Carrie Russell's great. I'll always love to watch her. She's a treat. Second film I'll talk about is Bombshell. This is the 2019 film directed by Jay Roach, stars Charlize Theron, Nicole Kidman, Margot Robbie, 2 Australians and a South African. Isn't that funny?
Yeah, it is.
And they're playing these Fox News anchors, these, Roger Ailes, this guy, man, he was a piece of shit. He was basically sexually harassing women,
Sure.
He wanted a certain look. If you look at the Fox News anchors, they're all blonde, long legs, He wanted to make sure they always wore shirts, short skirts and heels and stuff. And it was basically a story about how these women finally had enough and finally stood up to him.
Right.
Charlize Theron, I think, was nominated for an Academy Award for this.
She was.
Was she?
Yeah.
As Megyn Kelly, and she looks a lot like Megyn Kelly.
She does.
Nicole Kidman, her role wasn't as big, but she had a very integral part in the film itself, and she was the one that basically the first one to sue Roger Ailes, and then Margot Robbie plays kind of like the newbie. This is her chance to come in and do, and then she was basically a victim, another victim. But there's a great scene between Robbie's character and Charlize Megan Kelly, where she did it happen to you? Yeah, it happened to me, and I had to do it because I wanted to move up and for my career. It's just, why didn't you tell anybody? You could have saved the rest of us from. And that's that big argument. Why didn't what took these women so long to speak out?
Sure.
If they would have spoken out earlier, there's that whole dynamic and argument about that. And it was a surprisingly good movie. I think this came out before the pandemic, and I was debating on whether to go see it or not. I thought it's just going to be another one of those true stories, but not that interesting. But the movie was actually really good.
And you got to talk about the makeup in this film too, because just the slight adjustments they did to Charlize to make her look like Megan Kelly,
her hairdo, everything,
and Lithgow as Roger Ailes. John Lithgow is just unrecognizable.
He's basically Jabba the Hutt, and even in the movie he references that. Yeah, they call me Jabba the Hutt, because he was a literally slime bag. He was just the scummiest piece.
He was that dude.
Crap.
Yeah, remember we covered this movie back when we used to do the Up and Coming. So we did talk a little bit about this film. This is actually a film I wanted to see as well because I've seen Megan Kelly on many different programs, even when she had her own show and when it got canceled. So this is very intriguing to me. I call this the real Charlie's Angels, I guess. But go ahead.
All right, and the last movie I'll talk about is 2020 film, just came out Friday, The Tax Collector, David Ayer film. Went and saw it Friday, snuck out of work early, went to the 420 show.
The 420 show.
420 show. Yeah, they literally had a 420 show. So Tax Collector is basically about these guys. They do collect from the local LA street gangs. I guess it's sort of like they're taking their cut. They work for a boss, and they collect all the money, and they're badasses. They drive around LA in a big SUV. And then another guy comes into town. He's an old rival of the boss, and now he wants to take over. And now it just upends this guy's family.
Sure.
It's Bobby Soto. He's the lead. Shia LaBeouf is in it. He's not the lead, and he's the star. I mean, he's a star of films and stuff, but he plays like his right-hand man. He's like his enforcer. Plays a badass, although he does nothing badass in the movie, literally throughout the movie. He even got like tattooed all over, like his character's name is Creeper. He got this big,
Creeper,
a real tattoo on his stomach. It's just Creeper. But in the movie, he never takes his shirt off. You never see his tattoos. But it's a very stylized movie. It's very melodramatic, especially the scenes of the Soto and his family. His wife is played by Cynthia Carmona, beautiful girl. And it's so violent. It's probably one of David Ayer's more violent films, if you can believe that. This is a guy who did Fury. It'll kind of remind you of the old movie Harsh Times with Christian Bale. And it's that L.A. vatos and Crips and Bloods and all this stuff, and guys being macho and trying to, be the roosters, puffing out their chests.
Sure, the alphas.
It's kind of shades of that Refn Amazon series, Too Old to Die Young. The new guy that's coming in, this Conejo, he's into Santeria. He's drinking and spitting, and he's got an altar, and he's trying to get the power and all this stuff. So, it's super violent. So it's not for everybody.
Okay.
David Ayer. It's not one of his best. I'd put it on lower tier David Ayer films, but it's a decent watch. I enjoyed it.
Okay. How about you, Kazak? What have you watched since we last saw you?
All right. So I'm a little tired this morning. I apologize.
That's all right.
But for a good reason, because I just got out last night from catching The Last Starfighter.
Okay.
This film, it made me feel like I'm 8 years old again.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie. It's remarkable what you remember, from watching a movie as a kid over and over and over again. Because this was one of those movies that was on cable that was just on all the time.
Yeah.
But when you're 8 years old, this is the ideal film. You've got spaceships and fights. But the thing is that now I see it, from this point of view, from this, past 40 point of view, and the movie, the themes are universal, and it's still just one of those, heartwarming, super 80s films. But the fact is that there are things in there that I didn't remember, like I didn't know that there were no miniatures in this film. Every bit of action that you see in there, it's all computer generated. This is the first space battle that they show. It has a full 27 minutes of digital footage. Wow. And in 1984, when you've got computers that aren't even as powerful as your cell phone, rendering these, it took 6 months to get all that together. And little things like you have the girl from Night of the Comet in there, Dan O'Herlihy as Greg, who you remember as the old man in RoboCop, or Silver Shamrock if you're a Halloween 3 guy, which I'm not, but because it's terrible. It's still just a fun movie, and I do want to give a shout out to Devin Pike and the guys at Carburet. Carburet is a Dallas kind of new institution. These guys basically put up a drive-in in the parking lot of a bar. So like I said, this is what I love. I love drive-in culture coming back into the fold because of COVID-19. If it's one good thing that comes out of this, it's drive-in movies coming back. I know that we're going to see Walmart actually start to host movies in their parking lot. You've got theaters that are jumping on this, bars that are jumping on this, and it's great. Because again, you've got a socially distanced outside experience that's just getting people together to watch a film again. And like I said, the guys at Carburet do it really well because not only do they do the film, but they'll also institute live events into it. They'll have bands, or they'll have dancers, or they'll have artists and things like that. Just basically people making live entertainment, making it an event and a reason to go out. Yes. Like I said, it's definitely.
Did they get a good crowd?
Yeah. We were talking about this. We went to go do Flash Gordon a couple weeks ago, and basically we were making the joke that we had as many people in our parking lot as went out to the Vanilla Ice show that they were trying to do 6 months ago. just basically, we get probably about maybe 200, 250 people in this. There, you've got about 60 cars, and it's just fun. Serves are top notch at Brizo, so like I said, shout outs to them.
Nice.
I also did want to really touch quick on a couple of things that I did watch on TV. First of all, I did check in with Disney Plus's Muppets Now. I'm a Muppets guy. I always have been.
Sure.
And it's still entertaining. It's still entertaining as anything goes. And like I said, in this time, you've got kind of like elevated humor. You've got kind of elevated adult humor, but it's still that friendly kid level of stuff too. And it's still juvenile. It's still vaudeville, but it's still fun. The last thing that I want to talk about is a movie that just dropped on Shudder last week. It's a movie called Host. This is possibly the most efficient horror film I've seen in ages.
Efficient, you said?
Yeah. It's 56 minutes long.
Whoa.
And every minute counts.
Nice.
The plot is that about 5 or 6 people get together on Zoom to do a seance, and things go sideways.
Wow.
But the whole thing is shot on Zoom.
Nice.
So basically, the director Rob Savage, came up with a video that went viral and was able to extend the concept into a 56-minute film. But because you can't get actors into a studio anymore, they made it on Zoom. They made it from homes. They made it and they did the digital editing and things like that. All of it's on Zoom. So the whole thing that you're seeing is a multi-screen experience. So
variation on the found footage.
Exactly, but I mean, this is done. Forget the Paranormal Activity, forget the Blair Witch. This is how found footage goes. Wow. This is really well done. You're getting reactions and action on the screen the whole time. It's just absolutely fantastic, and like I said, every minute counts, and minutes of it are just terrifying. Because, like I said, if you're someone who does Zoom calls all day, if this is your human interaction these days, if this is how you're working, and you're watching it on a laptop with your headphones in, it's terrifying.
Yep. Oh, wow.
So like I said, it's really something to experience. Check out that on Shudder. And, of course, next week we're getting one more special Joe Bob's Last Drive-In. We're getting a Hatchet and one more film. So like I said, if you're a drive-in guy, go check out Shudder this week. It's a good time to subscribe.
I love it. That's good stuff. I do want to see that because I am on Zoom all day long doing my business stuff. So
if you don't have a subscription to Shudder, even if you get the free trial, this one's worth the watch, man.
Well, I'm in it, and it's only going to take 56 minutes. I'm even more in it for that.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I didn't get a chance to watch a whole bunch. I have been doing a lot of extra work and some things with another project of mine that I'm working on we'll talk about later. But I did get to watch one of my favorites, which is a film called The Equalizer, which is loosely based off the TV series in the 80s. But it's Antoine Fuqua as the director here, who also directed Denzel in Training Day. And so this is about Robert McCall, Denzel Washington, who's a former ex-military guy, badass, black ops, paramilitary, all that good stuff. And he's just trying to leave that life because it cost him his wife. It cost him his family and everything else. So he's just trying to live a normal life. And he meets, in this movie, Terry, played by Chloe Grace Moretz, who's a young wannabe singer and recording artist. But to get by, she's a lady of the night. And so they meet because he can't sleep and she can't sleep, and they usually are at the same diner, and they start talking, and you find out that Robert McCall reads a lot of books, so this is a super smart guy. And so they just have this wonderful dialogue. Now, I say all that to tell you, what is this movie? This movie is an action thriller movie, and it's ultra violent. It came out about a couple of months before John Wick. I will piss you off right now by telling you that Equalizer is better than John Wick. I do like John Wick 2, but John Wick compared to this one, here's the difference. In John Wick 1, guy just starts killing people because they kill his dog, and that's basically all you have is the reference to that. And the villains
Guy
are
in a
nothing.
black suit saving the world yet again. Every Keanu Reeves film ever made.
Yes. And the villains are non-noteworthy in that movie, and they're stupid, and their dialogue is dumb in that movie as far as I'm concerned. But in Equalizer, you've got this Russian mob that actually is using these women as prostitutes that are making their money off that, plus the drug deal. And they're also working with some of the other undercurrents in that city as well, and they just have power, and they've been ruining people. So what we get to see here is we get to see Robert McCall basically play an Avenger, right? He's the avenging angel is what he is. And so when he sees what they do to her, and they beat her up and smack her around, and he sees that, he flips the switch, and now it's all about, I'm going to take each and every one of these guys out methodically. And to watch this movie, if you like to see the violence, if you like to see the kills, it's great. Now, why another reason? You actually care about the characters in this one. I don't care about anybody in John Wick. I mean, I just don't. But here, you want to see what happens to, Chloe's character. And then the friend that he works with at the Home Depot, because during the day he works just at Home Depot. He's just a normal guy, right? And so you want to see how he's gonna, after he's befriended these people, because he's an introvert, stays home, read books, can't sleep, right? But he does make a few friends, and when he does, he's like the most hopeful guy. He sees the best in all of them, and so he wants to help them get there. Except for there's these people in the way. And like very much in Taken fashion, he likes to take care of people because he's got a special set of skills. And so he says a line, he has several one-liners.
Employee discounts.
That's right. Yes, it's employee discount. Lets him buy drills and hammers. But he has several one-liners in this that are just as good as any of the Bronson ones or the Clint Eastwood ones. So there's one line where someone says, "Hey, what happened to your hand?" And it was after he had to beat one of the guys up, and he hurt his hand beating the crap out of this one guy with an ashtray. So this guy says, "Hey, what happened to your hand?" He goes, "Oh, I hit something stupid." Just like, yes, and there are plenty of those kind of one-liners in this movie. So to me, it was an enjoyable watch. If you've never seen The Equalizer, you've got to watch this. It came out in 2014. Antoine Fuqua was the director as well. And then I think in the film, the villain was really good. His name was Teddy, and this guy was just as cold and as calculating as Denzel Washington was. So just like in Hell or High Water, where the police and the two suspects brothers are playing this cat and mouse game, the same thing happens here, except for they're trying to mind screw each other. So Denzel's basically telling them in a bar, right? That's all their bar that they have all their men in, and he's just walking in with a pair of glasses that he broke off somebody's face. It's one of his guys, and they're sitting there just basically telling each other, "Yeah, I could probably get out of this room before you could even move once." And the other guy's like, "Oh, you just don't have an idea of where we are and who we are around here." And then you hear Denzel take him apart about, so you're just a little kid that was abandoned and you joined the military and you thought that was something? Oh. And it's just the way they're going, the dialogue is like throwing fists, but they're doing it with verbiage. And I love that scene. That scene goes on for about maybe 8 minutes, but it's perfect. Talking down to each other while at the same time you're wondering, now he is going to get out of there, right? Because he is in that guy's parlor. So wonderful. Equalizer 2014. Go watch this film. They did do a second one, and the second one wasn't very good at all compared to this first one, but the first one was the gold standard. And then, by the way, John Wick, I didn't like the first one, but I actually thought the second John Wick was a little better. So there's that. And that would be Just Seen It. So now, ladies and gentlemen, let's get to the topic of the day, the topic du jour. And that is, we'll start off first with talking about our favorite and most enjoyable movies in the 80s. From my perspective, since it's my birthday, what I'm going to do is I picked films, because there's a lot of movies in the 80s. I picked films that were transformative in how I watched film going forward. So those are going to be mine, not necessarily anyone's. It has to be the top ranked movie ever, but just the ones that had something to do with that. And we're going to start with the film Samurai.
All right, that's
80s.
That's how I picked mine as well.
Perfect.
Films that I watched and stood out to me and made me look at films a different way. Like I'd never seen anything like them. I'll start with 1981. I saw this film. I still remember the theater. I saw it in The Road Warrior, and this is Mad Max 2, directed by George Miller. Stars Mel Gibson and a cast of Australian actors, But this film blew me away because I love cars, I love fast cars,
Yes.
roads and stunts, and this had it in spades, man. And there's 3 action set pieces, one in the beginning, one in the middle, and one in the end, and each one of them is more spectacular than the other. And it's got some villains that are, way over the top, very comic booky, but in a way, it's post-apocalyptic and everybody's desperate for gasoline. They need the gasoline for their vehicles, and you see this collection of vehicles is like junk but fast. And there's a guy in a gyrocopter. He's a great character as well. I think they call him the Gyro Man. I don't know, but I just love this film, and I would just remember just watching this and just being in awe of, because nothing's CGI in it. If you saw Mad Max Fury Road, there's so much CGI in it, and that really kind of like turned me off of that film. Yeah, it was very imaginative. The design was great.
Yeah.
But this movie was all practical stunts. And I mean, there's a scene in there where a truck hits something, a guy goes flying, he's somersaulting, and he hits something. And you read later that stunt, the guy broke both his legs in that stunt. They kept it in the film. But, oh my God. Yeah, the stunts in this movie are unbelievable. The second one I'll talk about is 1985. I was in Houston, out of town, visiting a friend, and I had time to kill, and I went to go see this To Live and Die in L.A., William Friedkin. Oh my God. From the opening scene of Willem Dafoe's he's a counterfeiter, and it shows how almost in detail of how he counterfeits money. He makes the plates, shoots it, puts it on glass, mixes the paint, everything, and then puts the serial numbers automatically, and then he takes it and puts it in a dryer with some poker chips to kind of beat it up, and that's how he makes his cash. And then he launders it through black LA gangs and stuff. This is an action film. It's William Peterson plays Chance. He's a Secret Service agent who, at the beginning of the film, basically saves the president from a terrorist bomb. And his partner, his original partner retires, and he gets a new partner. Mm-hmm. And then this guy wants the nail masters, and that's like a cat and mouse game as well. Mm-hmm. This guy he knows. Okay, if you're trying to get me by undercover I know you've got to come up with the cash, and he can't get the Secret Service just can't get cash. So there's a scene where they basically rob a guy that they know he has cash, and that ensuing chasing is probably one of the all-timers. This is William Friedkin, of course, who did the French Connection. I think the chase scene in this one tops that one.
Wow,
Really?
that's saying a lot.
Yes,
Boy.
I mean, 'cause these guys are like going wrong way on a LA freeway,
Wow.
and cars are, oh my God. I mean, and this chase goes on for quite a long time, and probably one of the most shocking scenes towards the end. I won't go into it, but
Sure.
wow, this movie just blew me away, and it's just like never seen anything like it as far as crime films. Then if I'm going to talk about 1987, probably one of my favorite Kubrick films is Full Metal Jacket. Stars Matthew Modine, Vincent D'Onofrio, Arlie Ermey as the great, Sergeant Hartman. Most of the first part of the movie is basically them in boot camp, and the Marines, how they go through their physical training and how they're basically brainwashed to be killers, basically. And there's a lot of black humor in this film. And one of my favorite scenes is when Hartman is talking to the guys about the shooter, like the Whitman, who shot so many from the Austin Tower, and Lee Harvey Oswald, who hit Kennedy with with a bolt action Italian carbine, blah blah blah. He says, "Anybody know what these guys have in common?" He says, "Yeah, they were trained in the Marines, sir." It's like, oh my gosh, it's like, how dark is that? Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and Arlie Ermey in this film, man. He coming up with the dialogue that he did, because he basically wrote almost all of his dialogue.
He wasn't even casting it. They just brought him in as a consultant, just to come up with this, the dialogue, make sure the drill sergeant was going to be realistic. And then he ended up doing it himself because Kubrick loved his videotapes.
Didn't he have like 150 lines that he'd written
goodness.
out of the film?
And then the second half is just when they go to Vietnam, and it's just horrendous. This is a very hard film for me to watch the first time I watched it, because the end gets really dark and goes into some really dark places. And I think it's one of Kubrick's strongest films. I mean, it took this guy. It was an amazing achievement for him to shoot this film, and the action, the dialogue, the script is brilliant, I think, and it probably is very like anti-war satirical, and it's one of my all-time favorite films.
I appreciate
Those
that.
are my 80s.
There's your 80s. Hey, Zach, your 80s.
All right, so for me, this, I got to tell you, this one was really hard for me, just because
Yes,
when
hard.
it's the decade that you grow up in,
Many,
and it's the film and it's the movies that formulate who you are, it's really hard to pick and choose.
Oh, yeah.
I chose, I think, the three that stylistically kind of shaped my tastes and made me want to watch movies over and over again.
Yes.
The first one that I'll go with is Ivan Reitman's Ghostbusters.
Yes.
Like I said, you're getting like I said, the whole National Lampoon guys at their peak. You've got Murray, Aykroyd, and Ramis coming in, and just basically you're getting a visual comedy that's showing stuff you haven't seen. The dialogue is whip smart. The pacing is terrific, and like I said, you just little things, small roles made huge, like Rick Moranis, Sigourney Weaver basically taking a 180 from Alien and Aliens into this, a smart, one of almost sex pot creature, just in the same film, and of course it's just fun. It's still fun to watch.
Yes, it is.
The Bernie Brillstein score, the Elmer Bernstein score, and just everything in it is fun. You've got three guys who really like each other playing off each other.
Yes.
And in addition to that, you're getting just some of the best special effects that up to that point we're seeing on a movie screen. Just it's innovative, it's fun, and it's these guys at the peak of their power. If you're a guy who likes a National Lampoon class, this is kind of one of those. This is one of those just perfect films that you're seeing in there. The second film that I chose I chose Beetlejuice. There, and again, you've got a lot of Tim Burton films that can go into this. This one I chose because, again, the dialogue is funny. Michael Keaton is just outstanding in the role. Gina Davis and Alec Baldwin playing just a perfect couple. And, of course, you've got Catherine O'Hara as just the mother from the stylish mother from hell, Winona Ryder as an adorable goth child. Just like I said, it's got dark sensibilities, it's got dark humor, but the color choices in the film, the attention to detail, all of it is just fun, and it holds up. It holds up, 20, 30 years later now.
Absolutely.
And like I said, it's Tim Burton really, I think, at almost the height of his peak. It's almost like this is where he peaked out and then kind of started to. You can argue Batman. You can argue Batman, but because again, that was Tim Burton's Batman.
Right.
If you don't like that Batman, that's down to you. I liked it.
Yeah.
I still enjoy it. I'll watch it over and over again. But like I said, Tim Burton, is a really wonderful visual director. He's a guy who really gets art in film, and that was, like I said, looking at guys who went for bold color choices, like Spike Lee or things like that. It really kind of brought that into the mainstream. You were going from like kind of dull color palettes in the 70s and 80s to really kind of getting something bright but dark at the same time. It's cartoonish and it's fun.
Yeah.
The last one that I chose was Terry Gilliam's Time Bandits. Again, it's another one of my favorite kids' films because it is the story of a kid. But like I said, everyone in this film is just it's a weird film.
Yeah.
It's hard to explain to people if you just have to say go watch this film. But it's a kid who travels through time through basically the people who basically design things for God.
Yeah.
And it's just Terry Gilliam being strange. And it's still wonderful to pace. You've got a great cast. You've got Sean Connery, John Cleese, Michael Palin, and
it's a whole
all the
cast
little
of
people
producers.
actors are brilliant.
Oh,
Yeah.
God,
They're just growling at each other. These guys are all good. I think one of them was Kenny Baker, right?
Yes, Kenny Baker does make the appearance in there.
He's like the leader.
Yeah.
You could tell that-
Kenny Baker's not the leader. Kenny Baker is Fidget. He's one of kind of the sideline guys. I'd have to look up the actor, but
Terry Gilliam always had a love for history, and he consumed historical books. That's why he had the scene with Napoleon and these other historical figures, and the attention to detail in that movie is incredible.
Yeah.
And there's just something happening in every scene. It's just background is just filled with stuff, and it's a brilliant film. I love that film.
Yeah, David Rappaport is Randall. He's kind of the leader.
Randall,
but just all the great kind of hallmarks of a Terry Gilliam film are in this one, and it's a film that you can show to your kids because
It's very imaginative.
every bit of it. If you want to introduce your kids into weird films, this is a good place to start because it's really out there. It's a very strange story, but it's so fun. And ends so sadly. It really ends so sadly.
Yeah.
But anyway, it was just one of those kind of weird films that guided me as a kid who was destined to be weird and is going to enjoy weird stuff. So that's what drove me in. So
I love it.
I go for it.
I love it. Well, I'll tell you my 80s. So, again, very interesting, unique one. Probably nobody's watched this film. Maybe a few people have, but I love it. The movie I'm talking about is in 1985, which I was a junior in high school then. And there was a form of music that was blown up in the 80s called rap music. And at this point, I'd never seen rap music on like presented in video form. In fact, this biopic, if you will, this could almost be a biopic because it's basically retelling the story of how Def Jam Records was started, where you would find Run DMC, the Beastie Boys, all the greatest hip-hop artists of the 80s that just came out when it was still more of a fun type thing and grabbing a microphone and talking about what area code, what borough you're from in New York and that sort of thing. And so this movie's great. I mean, it was one of those things where like we had to wait till Ray to get the first biopic that was pretty good, and then after Ray, you had Johnny Cash first, then you had Ray, then you had Straight Outta Compton, and then you had the Remy Malek one as well. But this, before all that, gave me a sense of, oh wow, I'm getting some history about an art form I love, hip hop, which is rap at that time. I'm seeing what it took to build it. So you had a white guy, Rick Rubin, get together with Russell Simmons, who's the brother of Run DMC. And they're like, we got to get this out on record. We got to put this on wax. This new thing, it's got its own culture behind it. It's got its style of clothing that you wear. It's got the graffiti art that comes with it. It's got the dancers that come with it, the dancing style. And then, of course, the rappers. And all this was happening in broke boroughs of New York. Okay, these kids did not have money to go and jet ski. They didn't have money to buy equipment. What they did is they took their parents' records, flipped them over, because back in the day in vinyl, you used to have instrumentals on the other side. They would just flip over the records, play the instrumental, and grab the microphone and just try to hold court. Mm-hmm. And now that art form is worth billions of dollars. Almost every commercial has hip-hop in it when they're trying to sell a product. And I like the fact that some kids from New York who were broke and had nothing created one of the most dominating forces that has been used not only just as music, but for advertising. And so in this, you get to see Curtis Blow, who's one of the mainstays. If you don't know Curtis Blow, you need to find out about the Breaks song.
Godfather.
Run DMC. There's a cameo, some other bands who were going to break out, who hadn't broken out yet, which was Beastie Boys are in this. New Edition, the R&B group, is in this. You have Sheila E., Prince's proteges in this. And then a famous actor, Blair Underwood, who would later on be on a couple of TV shows, law shows on TV back in the 80s and 90s. So this was all this talent coming together at once to celebrate the beginning of how hip-hop, what it had to do just to get on record, because back then they thought, that ain't an art form. There's no music. They're ripping off other people's music by doing this and this and this and this. But what you couldn't deny was the poetry, the creative rhymes, the rhythms and the flows, and how different boroughs of New York had a different style. And that's what they were doing. Initially, rap was battling that way. It was never about Bloods and guns and Crips and Bloods and all that stuff. That's not what hip-hop started as. This is actually what the opposite of what hip-hop was, what you see it as today. Back then, it was about that. So if you haven't seen Crush Groove, I'm telling you right now, if you want to see a good biopic that's kind of almost not a biopic in a way, with some great stars that you will recognize who went on to do great things way after 85, this is the movie you need to watch. So I had that in there. And that changed the way I saw music and movies, how they could be combined together. Number 2 for me is The Karate Kid. So I loved this deal here. So as somebody who grew up watching the martial arts films and watching from the 60s and the and early 70s, all those films with all the quick, fast punching ninja guys and all the, the Bruce Lee films, and then everyone after that had some sort of Lee in their name that was going to do something great in terms of fast kung fu fighting. Now you get this kind of very centered in your teenage years Karate Kid. So you get Pat Morita, and then and Ralph Macchio. And by the way,
coming of age story as well. Yeah.
Coming of age story, but if you want, you could say it this way: this is an extension of Luke and Yoda. That's what that's what this is, right?
Absolutely.
And then now, but it's placed here, and it's in America, and it's in California, and of course he's the underdog, and we always root for the underdogs. And of course he's whiny and complaining because he just doesn't have what everybody else has. But I'll tell you, in Karate Kid, what really got me was that scene where he tries to take the girl out on a date, the high-class girl out on a date, and the car breaks down.
Elizabeth Shue?
Yes, and he has to get out and push the car, and I thought, oh, how embarrassing to go out on a date. You're this poor guy from Reseda or whatever, and you go to the nice part of town to pick up the girl.
Picking you up, and the station wagon.
Yes, and the station wagon breaks down. Yeah. And I was like, oh. But then also the parts of just him not knowing that, hey, wax on, wax off, and all the things he's been doing were actually him, Marita teaching him basically how to actually do the forms.
Right.
But he saw it just as in him going, oh, you're making me do all this work for you. When am I ever going to learn how to kick butt? And he's like, it's not about that, Danielson. And so movie, while it was set to be for teenage ears and eyes, it actually had a lot of wisdom in it. And it does pick up on some themes that I think anybody could relate to. And I would say my number 1 film, I got to be consistent.
By the way, Cobra Kai, I think, just got picked up by Netflix, I think.
Yes, so how about that?
Transplant from YouTube to Netflix. I'm dying to see that, by the way.
The continuation, yes. And so to be consistent, I said in the 70s that the number 1 movie was Star Wars. And in the 80s, My favorite one's going to be Empire Strikes Back for a different reason. Now, up until this point, I'd only seen movies where the good guys always won. And so to see Empire Strikes Back and see it not copy like you see today, it did not copy its predecessor at all. It brought back the same characters, but they moved and they were into a different place. They weren't still in the same place they were back in the 77 Star Wars film. Now they'd already moved on. They're commanders. They're in the ice planet, which was awesome to shoot ice and a snow planet because that was great. Because if you'd have done the movie again in sand and dirt, but the idea that Lucas, just a little detail like that, location, shows up here. But the idea that you get the big twist of all times in movies happens in this movie, and then just the whole idea that, wow, I really wanted them to win, and they just didn't. And in fact, some critics at the time said this was the worst Star Wars movie. And it's funny because today it is regarded as the best Star Wars movie because of this exact ending. So for me, 80s, I have to still give it to Empire Strikes Back. In the 80s, I loved a lot of movies, but this showed me that the ending doesn't always have to be peaches and cream and rainbows and puppy dogs, and still be good. And I loved that for that reason.
Yeah, you got to give credit to Lawrence Kasdan.
Yes,
on that, just because he took the existing franchise and elevated that dialogue and elevated all the relationships in this, getting it really true to Lucas's vision, man.
That's exactly right. And the time that we get to spend with Darth Vader, just seeing just a little bit more about who this madman is, really. Because in the first one, he was there, but basically Grand Moff Tarkin was holding the leash to him. But in Empire Strikes Back, this is all Darth Vader saying, no, I'm going to find that bogey that got away when I spun out into space. And he was dead set on finding who this kid is that was in that jet fighter who did that, who was able to get by from him and help make him look bad to the Emperor. So I thought that was great. So let's now jump into the 90s. And Carlos, we're back at you.
All right, 90s. Let's start with 1993. True Romance. This is probably one of my all-time favorites. Brilliant script by Tarantino and Roger Avary. Directed by the great Tony Scott. Rest in peace, Tony. Stars Christian Slater, Patricia Arquette, Gary Oldman as the great Drexel Spivey, one of my favorite movie villains.
He's on screen 10 minutes and
he just basically commands the screen in that film. Some great lines in this film. The dialogue is just brilliant. I love the basic story of it. Is this guy, he's basically a comic book nerd and loves kung fu movies, and he meets this girl, Alabama, blonde cupcake, Roseanne Arquette, and they go to the movies and have a piece of pie afterwards, and he falls in love, man. He's just like, yeah, he's it. He's done for. And then he wants to meet Spivey because he wants to buy her back. She's basically, he finds out she's a prostitute, and Spivey is her pimp. And he offers him money, and of course he refuses. And one thing leads to another. And next thing you know, they're on the run with drugs, and they want to go to L.A. to sell this suitcase full of cocaine. And it gets pretty violent and brutal. And James Gandolfini, oh my God, the scene where he basically beats her up in this hotel room is terrifying. And there's a great scene also with Brad Pitt playing just this burnt out, smokes weed all day long, and Christopher Walken's character comes and sees him.
How about Dennis Hopper versus Christopher Walken?
I was about to
How
say,
did these two never cross paths on screen before?
I was about to say that scene of them two in his trailer is probably one of the all-time
Oh
great
my
scenes.
God!
And I won't go into that, but it's just a classic in itself. Just watch that scene, and it's beautiful.
Yeah, everyone in that film plays off each other just so well.
Yeah.
The chemistry on there is just undeniable, man.
Let's move on to 1995.
Okay.
Michael Mann, the great Michael Mann.
Oh.
Heat. This is one of my all-time favorite crime films, and this is epic. And I remember seeing this in theater as well, and just being mesmerized the entire time by just the acting, the performances of De Niro and Pacino. These two guys, one's the lawman, Vince Hanna, lieutenant, whose main job is to hunt down crews, these guys that do these heists. And Neil McCauley, he's the leader of this crew, and they do break-ins. Val Kilmer is one of his guys. And this is back and forth. Another film where it's cat and mouse. Vince is trying to figure out how to hunt this guy down, and Neil's one step ahead of him, and that's where the kind of the line comes in. You don't want to have enough stuff in your life so when the heat is around the corner, you can't just take off in 15 minutes. You can just leave and get away. He doesn't want to ever have to go back to prison. He's been in prison. He never wants to go back again. So he's either going to die or he's going to escape. And this is really to me is like a guy's movie, and even the end of the movie always chokes me up. I won't give away the ending, but
sure.
Man, that music and that synth score, the cast is unbelievable. It's just one of my all-time films, and I watch this probably once a year. Probably seen it at least a dozen times. 1997, Boogie Nights, Paul Thomas Anderson, one of his earliest films, and man, this film was basically about the porn industry at the time when it was the end of shooting porn on film and they were just about to go to video. And the last great auteurs of the porn industry, these guys thought they were really doing art. They were trying to come up with more dramatic plots other than the pizza guy shows up and the broad answers the door and then there's sex. I had to admit, I did watch in the 80s movies like this, where it actually had plot. Of course, there's a lot of sex in it. And I was kind of amazed how, some of these characters, they really are played very heartfelt, and they can get really dramatic in their creativity in the films, where you got to have a sex scene like every 15 minutes or 10 minutes sometimes, but then you got to have a story too. So I kind of admired how they did it. But yeah, Mark Wahlberg, I'm not a fan of Mark Wahlberg, but he was probably as perfect as this role as you ever could see him. Julianne Moore, who plays the character Amber Waves, and of course Burt Reynolds, one of his last roles, perfectly cast as this old-time Jack Horner, this porn director who wanted to make a great film that people would remember and not just look at it as just porn, just flesh and the cum shots, all that stuff. William H. Macy plays Little Bill, one of the great characters. Man, it's a really tragic character.
Every character in this film is tragic.
Really, just about by the end of the film, man, they get all burned out, and it's basically a kind of a treatise on the 70s. How everybody was burnt out by then, and just very heavy film. Loved it though. Watch that repeatedly.
And it's so good on viewing, man.
Yes, sir. How about you, Kazak, for the 90s?
All right. So for me, I will start with what I think was probably the best slacker movie of the 90s, and that was Kevin Smith's Clerks.
Yes.
You're basically getting the story of this film is just fantastic because it is just a movie that was shot with no budget. You got like $7,000, rented cameras, things like that, taking over the store where Kevin works at during the day, filming it at night, and getting this film done. Basically, it's a story of getting a movie done. The dialogue is, of course, whip smart, and of course, it sounds like everyday New Jersey. The actors are just basically pulled from, community theater. But I mean, it's still so funny, and I mean, it basically kickstarts the independent revolution. It basically gets films out of the big studios and into mainstream eyes. It's one of those films that, it starts the avalanche of the Quentin Tarantinos, and it starts getting foreign films over. It's Miramax doing what they did best, and that's not harassing women. That's basically bringing in films that out of the cross culture into the mainstream and getting it seen. But I mean, the film itself just still holds up because it is classic human dialogue. It's funny as hell, and it still holds up today because again, it is just identifiable themes of I'm not supposed to be here today, hating your workplace, hating your life, and just doing stupid stuff with your friends. And,
totally.
And it's just a horrible day in the life. But God, is it the best horrible day in the life?
Oh my gosh! Yeah, it's shot in black and white in a time where everything's color and everything's about using new technology. Here, this is kind of almost a throwback.
Yeah,
in that
title
way.
cards like Damien Ma and Reconciliations. It's still funny, and of course and of course it's also the fanboy making the film. So you're getting all those great little fanboy jokes, and I remember that, I recognize that. So if you're a nerd, if you're a film nerd, it's a comedy for you.
I got that reference.
The second one that I chose for a specific reason. It is at the end of the 90s, but it is kind of another one of those identifiable comedies, and that's Office Space. You've got Mike Judge, who is fresh off the success of Beavis and Butthead, getting a feature film. It's a feature film shot here in the Metroplex. So if you're a Dallas guy, you're looking at all those, and you're recognizing
Salinas.
You're recognizing all those terrible
Office
things that
parks, the boring,
parking lots. Because we've all had that job where it's the next step in our adulthood, and we absolutely hate it. But every bit of dialogue is identifiable. Every bit of it is identifiable. I also think it speaks to the power that this is a film that got no advertisement. It got no merchandising. It got nothing sold underneath it to sell it. But it made a huge impact on video. And what you really need to talk about in the 90s was the success of watching movies at a Blockbuster. This is a film that really built itself out of the direct-to-home market because, again, it was a film that once DVDs and VHS finally became affordable, you went home and this is one of those films that you bought, and it got better on viewing, so it got a huge cult following, and again, it's one
of those word of mouth films that if you watch it, you'll tell every one of your friends, "Oh, you got to see this movie."
Exactly, and it's a film that you bring home and you watch with your friends. So
like Clerks.
Exactly. So it's a film that basically built itself out of watching it at home. And I think, like I said, it's the height of Blockbuster, and it's also the downfall of it too at the same time. Because again, once you can view it at home, why would you go to the theater? I hate to say that, but it's true. The third film that I chose, I was going back and forth because I had to make a decision on one because, again, this is kind of your next step. I went with Natural Born Killers on this one. Oliver
Woody Harrelson.
Again, you've got a Tarantino driven script. You've got Oliver Stone again at the height of his visual peak, and you've got such crazy, weird, almost perverse and notable themes because, again, you've got a news cycle building terrible people up. You've got bad culture going bad, but every bit of it is you want these characters to succeed, but you don't because they're just terrible freaking people. But I mean, every bit of this movie counts. Again, it's a film that while Oliver Stone did so well was that he wasn't wasting time in this film.
I think it's probably one of the most more artistic films.
Yeah,
actually.
Yes,
it is. It is stylistically, it goes all over the place. It goes to animation, and it goes to the 3-camera sitcom. It goes to the visual horror film, the visual horror film. And I mean, you've got so many over the top performances. Tom Sizemore, Robert Downey Jr., Tommy Lee Jones,
Rodney Dangerfield,
Juliette Lewis. Yeah, all of these just amazing actors just putting it over the top and going into almost a half satire, half horror film. All of it is just visual, and it's so impactful. And I remember walking out of this film and going, I was cheering for these people the whole time, and I feel terrible about it.
Yes.
So it was one of those films that just basically kind of put that kind of counteractive instinct in me, like, what did I just cheer for? So and it's a film that sticks with you. And again, it's Woody Harrelson being put on the map.
Yeah,
honestly, just
that's
because
right.
He's so terrifying as this character, but he's also so charismatic too. And that was, like I said, what Oliver Stone did really well with this film.
Yeah, no, it's excellent. I love it too. These are great. And so for my pick for the 90s, same thing. It's the 60s were hard. The 70s were really, really hard. The 80s were really, really hard. And in the 90s, I was surprised that there were a few more films that I actually liked in the 90s, but certainly not to the threshold that I had with the 70s and the 80s for sure. But one of the ones I could not forget about from the 90s, I'll start with Steven Spielberg's little joint that he came out with in 1998, so almost in the 2000s. It's a little movie called Saving Private Ryan. You might have heard of it. And this movie is incredible because, number one, Tom Hanks is already just blowing it up. He's just growing, and people are just learning to love his face whenever they see him in the screen, the big screen. Now, he was on the little screen. We know him as a comedian. We know him in funny, lighthearted movies. But now as a captain, this is interesting. So it even has something for everyone in that situation. So we have Matt Damon in this film as well. Also, Vin Diesel's in it. He's one of the characters that's part of that brigade that he's in, or that particular regiment. And what gets me about this film was that I remember, first of all, before I saw it, there were veterans being interviewed that were crying because when they said when they went to go see the movie for the private screening for the military veterans, it was the most realistic thing that they'd ever seen, and so they were crying through it. And then their big news thing was all about, oh, this movie's exploiting what happened on Normandy Beach and blah, 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 blah. But once you get past all that mess, what you see is the most intense 20 minutes of any movie ever.
Yeah.
Most intense 20 minutes. And the sound is just as important as the visuals. When you hear the bullets and those 80 caliber rounds hitting water, and they're still killing people because they have that much velocity on them coming into the water that they're killing guys who are underwater, bullets are still going through them. And you get the horror of what it must have been like for those 17, 18, and 19-year-old boys getting out thinking they're going to fight, and the Germans are right there on this big bunker, and they just take everybody out. Like, just nothing to it, just practically almost everyone out. And so when you see that chaos, and it's the first 20 minutes, and it doesn't let up, it just lets you just get hammered so you feel as hammered as they were when they were being fired upon. So I never forgot that. And then I think one scene in that movie that really kills me is that scene where the guy Oppum, who's not really the violent guy in the whole movie, he's the guy that just doesn't want to shoot, right? He just wants to type stuff. He's in this one villa in France where the German guy's in there fighting hand to hand with one of his guys, and he does nothing.
He's frozen with fear.
Because he's frozen with fear. He's scared to death. And basically, the way his buddy dies, where the German just sticks the knife in deeper and deeper and deeper, and the guy's like, "Mama," and he's dead. And then they show Oppum, and he's just sitting on the staircase like a punk, like a super punk, does nothing. And then you see the German get up, and this is what gets me about the scene. When the German gets up, it's like, no big deal. And then he starts to go down the staircase where Oppum is, and he doesn't kill him because he's no threat. He's not afraid of Oppum. He's like, you just let me kill one of your servicemen? I'm not afraid of you. I'm just going to walk right past you because I'm not even worried about you taking a gun and trying to shoot me from behind. That German just said, dude, I'm a man. You're a punk. And I sat there and I thought, oh my gosh, this is juicy, right? Because when do we feel like that sometimes? When do we feel like Oppum, where we just don't want to move because we think what's going on in the other room is so much more terrible if we don't engage it, right? And so what I love is that then you see him afterwards when he realized that he let a German guy go before, and that same German guy picked up a gun and came back and tried to kill him. Then he decided to get some balls and realized, dude, you're in a war zone, okay? You cannot think like this is academia. You're in a war zone where all things are off, and people are killing people, and they're thinking nothing of it, and people are collecting heads and fingers and knuckles of Germans and Jews and Americans just to take back. But he had no clue of his surroundings and what it really was about. And then when he does get the realization, then you see him finally wanting to fire back and do some things. And so, but it was very interesting. That I thought that piece, right? Because with men, it's a big thing because we're always told, you know, either you're man enough or you're not, right? And I guess for women, it's either you're pretty enough or you're not, right? And so for men, it's like you man enough or you're not. And to see Oppum be so scared that he wouldn't do a thing to help a brother who he was just eating with and laughing with earlier because he was so afraid of conflict and so afraid of what might happen. It's got to be something that's got to mess with you in the back of your head. That'd be like a dad not taking up for his son when his son gets jumped by a gang. How could you just sit back and watch your son get waylaid on, right? So that was huge for me. Saving Private Ryan, loved it. So then there's this other movie I also liked. Also had Matt Damon in it, but that wasn't the reason why I liked it the most. It was probably because of Robin Williams. And this would be a movie called Good Will Hunting, came out in 1997. This was just before we get the wonderfulness of Saving Private Ryan. And so in Good Will Hunting, I love it. Here's a guy who, Matt Damon is a character who's probably the smartest guy in the room, but he's the janitor at MIT. And he solves this big math problem. One of the professors up there, played by Skarsgård, Stellan Skarsgård, says, you got to check this guy out. And then to have Robin Williams come in. And that cat and mouse game between those two in terms of will, right? Will I just let people know that I'm hurting inside and why I chose to be a janitor even on this? Or am I going to sit back and make fun of my therapist because I may be smarter than him, even though he's humble and caring? And Robin Williams plays this role so good, right? To see him this is a guy who's playing Mork from Mork on TV, right? This is a guy who's played Mrs. Doubtfire and all these other things, right? But now he's playing a psychologist. Can he really pull it off? But the depth that he gives it was great. And of course, Ben Affleck's in this movie.
Yeah.
But then the one-liners too, right?
Script by Affleck and Damon.
It's Affleck and Damon reading the script, but Kevin Smith is the script doctor on it.
Yes.
And of course, you've got a Gus Van Sant.
Gus Van Sant is the director, yes.
So
absolutely. But and then the moments where when you see someone climb over a hill and get to the other side and just kind of start to live life. And that's what he was starting to do. And I love that line about, what are you going to do? I'm going to go see About a Girl, which was something that Robin Williams' characters as his therapist told him. So I thought that was great. And then I would say my final film of the 90s, I would be remiss again if I didn't talk about it. This film was Jurassic Park. So 1993, this is a Spielberg here joint. And I love this with Sam Neill and Laura Dern and Jeff Goldblum. And surprisingly enough, Samuel Jackson, who's in every movie. So he's been in Star Wars, he's been in Marvel, he's been in Jurassic Park,
and
he's been in Pulp Fiction, and he gets eaten.
He goes from eating to a dinosaur to getting eaten by a shark 2 years later.
Now, the reason why this is a good movie moment for me is think about this. Basically, Jurassic Park is Jaws on land. Those raptors, as vicious, the teeth and everything they had, and then the intelligence that they had, you're seeing Jaws on land. And Jaws worked wonderfully in the 70s. And so here, to see now, this was the new CGI coming back in. This is CGI starting to affect most of these films. That are getting better at this and the animatronics and all that stuff. And so Jurassic Park, if you watch the first one, not the third one or anything after that, but if you watch the first one again, like a kid, you can sit back because the children are big actors in this. The boy and the girl, when they're trapped by the raptors, you are terrified for them. And at the same time, there's the wonderment that kids have with monsters. Oh, yeah. Right? That you have too.
That
right?
scene in the tree when they're up in the tree and the dinosaurs.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a great scene. I love it.
It's a great scene. So Jurassic Park, again, it finally did something new again. It didn't just do another Jaws. It put it on land and said, let's just do this with raptors. Let's do this with dinosaurs. And let's say that this could happen. And let's set a whole world up for it. So the world building was great. And being Spielberg, the suspense was great. So I could not talk about Jurassic Park when you talk about the 90s.
And of course, the CGI is near flawless.
And there's actually a lot of
film.
more practical effects in that film that you would actually think there was.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they built a full-size
They did.
T-Rex. Yeah. And
it was incredible.
Those Velociraptors tromping down in that kitchen scene, those are big puppets, basically.
Mm-hmm. No, that was great. So now, ladies and gentlemen, what we thought we would do.
Well, I don't think we're going to be, because we're running out of time, we won't be able to get into our dishonorable mentions. We may have to save that. We may have to save that for a whole other show.
One
yes.
show of those.
Okay, we'll do that. We're okay with that.
Let's go ahead and go to our shout-outs, man.
All right.
Let's do that. Then the shout-outs will go to Carlos.
All right, let's shout out to my son Matt, my daughter Nicole down there in lockdown in Austin area, my cousins out Joel and Stella out in California, all my Twitter pals. Love all you guys.
Okay, Zach?
Yeah, I do want to shout out our counterparts on our first and third Sundays, our alternating Sundays here on DallasOnAir.com. That, of course, Eddie Medina and Cole Houston, who bring you the Rand Court Pit every first and third Sunday. And, of course, you're next week going to be bringing back Isle of Toys. I think we're doing a whole Hasbro episode this time around. So I think we're doing Hasbro on Isle of Toys, and we're doing Star Wars Hasbro on Rand Court Pit this week. So, like I said, if you're a toy guy, definitely something to check out. And coming back in September, I believe we're going to be bringing back Figments, the Unexplained Mysteries podcast. Colleen and Eddie taking on cryptids and UFOs and conspiracy theories. Like I said, it's great. And, of course, do check out everything great here on DallasOnAir.com, including 12-Pack, Best for Business, DFW Raw, and, of course, Smash the Mic, just all the great stuff that we have here. Like us, subscribe, and, of course, we do have T-shirts available. So, hey, do check out DallasOnAir.com every day.
All right, now shout-outs go to Horror Mike, Sean Presley, Lauren Wiedauer, Tristan Fraser, Harry Thomas, Troy Ross, Michael Paul, Daniel Meza, Mad Mel, Stephanie Crane, Scott Laney, and Sandra. And so for us, for episode 14 and for my birthday weekend, we're out of here. We're saying goodbye.
Sayonara, everybody. Have a great one. Wear your masks.
Wash your hands.
Stay home and watch a movie.
Blow your nose.